let's move on to something perhaps a little bit more positive. And well, is it positive? In my notes, the heading reads the AI earnings story versus the everything else story, which kind of sums up markets in a way. Um, Emerging markets and US equities have been leading global markets since the start of the Middle East conflict, driven by strong AI-linked earnings. South Korea and Taiwan, in particular, have outperformed, while inflation-exposed sectors like materials have lagged. The AI capital expenditure story among the hyperscalers, who we know as Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, and Oracle, is still running hard. Jonathan, how do you see this progressing throughout 2026?
Yeah, look, I'm still on board the AI train. You know my affection for Nvidia, which by the way reports on the 20th of May. So that'll come out 20th of May US time. So it'll be Thursday morning our time. So I hope everyone listening here will be up nice and early, waiting the earnings report of the greatest company in the history of greatest companies. I mean, Nvidia, is well above $5 trillion in terms of market value, led
Mm,
by one of the most extraordinary people, Jensen Huang, who, by the way, was with Trump, obviously, in Beijing. Um, Now, prior in the last few weeks, we had all the so-called hyperscalers. You just mentioned them: Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and Meta, announcing and re-emphasizing their commitment to increasing capex on the so-called AI build-out. And there's now some estimates that we will see AI-related capex in excess of $1 trillion in 2027. I think we're going to be about 850 or thereabouts in 2026 calendar year, but it'll go up to about a trillion in 2027. So let's just kind of pause and reflect on the enormity of that number. Whilst in the Middle East, we have an event which has never happened before, the Strait of Hormuz being closed, and we are also living through the largest energy crisis the world has ever experienced. We're now living through the AI transformative revolution and the commensurate massive, massive amount of money that is being spent to build this giant brain, which we can all equally access. So it's incredibly exciting. I say in all my speeches, Eugene, and you saw me speak obviously at your wonderful conference in Ho Chi Minh, and I said, just imagine a young girl growing up in a village in Burkina Faso, won't need to go to Harvard University because Harvard will come to her because each day she has access to the greatest minds, the
mm.
world's greatest minds. Her private tutors can be Einstein, Socrates, Aristotle, Newton, and we could go on. And that's what AI is all about. And every single one of us is going to have our lives changed by AI. So I'm a believer. I'm a huge believer. And we're seeing, as a consequence of this massive amount of spending by the largest companies in the world, that we're seeing beneficiaries of that. So Nvidia, of course, is the primary
Mm.
beneficiary. But then you've got all the companies such as the Microns of this world and the SK Hynix and Samsung, who basically manufacture all the memory that is required. And then you've got hundreds and hundreds of companies that get involved in manufacturing all the components needed in the build out of AI. And Asia is a treasure chest of these companies that manufacture these tiny little component parts. We've got fiber optics. And then, of course, you've got the commodity side, you've got copper. So there's a huge amount of money being spent, and there's a lot of beneficiaries. So the kind of so-called AI halo effect is very, very powerful. And that's being reflected in current earnings. So current earnings in the United States, which is completely dominated by
Mm.
AI related companies, has far exceeded expectations. So you've got a Micron, which has gone up 3 or 4 times in price in a relatively short period of time, but is selling on a forward multiple, price earnings multiple of about 8.5 times. You think, how can that happen? But it's because, of course, the market keeps ramping up its expected earnings into the future. So the bottom line is the US market has been continued to be driven by the AI phenomenon, and earnings have been a beneficiary of the AI phenomenon. And this brings me to a topic which I've been highlighting in my pain report for several weeks now, it puts the spotlight back on what we were talking about last year, but kind of we lost our way. I'm talking about the market.
Mm.
We used to talk about American exceptionalism. American exceptionalism was that, America dominated the world of AI, and it does. But this year, in 2026, we've not only got America winning and benefiting from the AI phenomenon, we've got America with being largely energy independent. So, in a relative sense, Eugene, in a relative sense, people have said, you know what? I'm not so keen on Europe anymore. I'm just going to go back into the United States. And
Mm.
we've seen a flow of capital out of non-US markets back into the US market. So the US market has done well this year, but particular sectors have done spectacularly well. And the other you raised, emerging markets, have done very, very well indeed. And we made an allocation last
Yeah.
year, or increased our allocation to emerging markets, I think in the third quarter of last year.
Yeah.
And emerging markets have done fantastically well. But a lot of that has been driven by AI related names, mainly and primarily TSMC, which is the largest company in the emerging market index, and then Samsung and SK Hynix. So the AI fountainhead of earnings prosperity has flowed through into emerging markets as well. And then you've got, Japan, for example, where again, I'll emphasize it again, is a treasure chest of these companies that manufacture components needed in the AI build out. So, yeah, the emerging markets have done well, and the US markets have obviously done well. Sadly, of course, our market here in Australia has not done well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting you say that because it's not just companies that are building AI, but it's the picks and shovels type. I refer to them as picks and shovels type companies that supply AI companies with
Yes.
infrastructure and tools and materials that they
Yeah.
need. You're talking about almost 2 trillion US dollars in investment just from the big companies over 2026 and 2027, right? So
Yeah.
that's an enormous
Yeah.
amount of money that these companies can feed from, I suppose.